Episode 4. This one had it all. Great drawings, goofy faces, I mean look at this Mickey Mouse sniffing cartoon nose. And some classic OG power pole action. Man, the choreography was so good. And this is just the 4th episode. Anyways, animation breakdown time. This one throws some fun action at you straight up. It's most likely by Shinichiro Manabe. Again, he's back already. And man, the intensity conveyed just through his drawings alone is great. It became pretty clear in the Goku Black and Tournament of Power arc how good he was at that. And I'm glad that's a trait of his work that's remained. But it's not just cool detailed drawings he can do, the gestures are super dynamic and unique. Like this one, low angle shot, bit more of a difficult perspective to draw from, interesting positioning, having everything off to the side, break the joints, a common thing animators do. You'd see this type of stuff by one of the top action guys, Kazuya Hisada on Dragon Ball Z. He would often break arms and sketch out super dynamic shots with great foreshortening, just fun approaches to characters that few other animators on Z were doing. Although the way Manabe draws lines around limbs kinda reminds me of Hiroyuki Imaishi and Yoshinori Kaneda, the latter name being someone all the animators just mentioned have drawn inspiration from, especially Hisada and Imaishi. You can also see the Kaneda skill influence through his wide spacing and modulated timing, which is what gives that snappy motion to Manabe's animation. And besides him, the choice to have the fireball erupt from the impact, you know, it's a nice little realism detail, but it's also a visual one that raises the intensity. The background art gets darker and changes color, the sky is filled with burning embers. And it makes the final blow that much more satisfying as all the force from Glorio's hit blows the fire away. Such a well done scene. But it's not just cool animation of some Plants vs Zombies look-alike getting pummeled. This first section is filled with great bits of character animation, even the smaller stuff like putting a plate on the table. There's this big zoom out and in with like action lines everywhere. There's just this flair to everything. Or after, you got this cartoony bit where the animator uses animation techniques like multiples and this smear whirlwind. And look at the flow to these drawings. You can tell whoever it was had fun animating this. Honestly, that kind of goes for everyone. Especially this episode's chief animation director, Naohiro Shintani himself. He pulls out so many fun and unique expressions that definitely enhances the comedic tone of these scenes. And it's not just expressions and animation, but also the characters' gestures which are on point. In episode 2, I pointed out the often stiff and symmetrical posing that was scattered throughout, and well, this is an example of how to do it right. Slight head tilt, draw the upper body off to the side, good line of action, then switch to more relaxed posing, hand on hip, the other arm on the bar, concise shape design. Shintani's always been pretty good at that. Again, strong line of action, nice flow. Like, it's definitely a thing a lot of people take for granted, but you'd be surprised how much just good posing can do to give that extra touch of realism to a scene, even if it's not that animated. Now what's even better again is Nakatsuru. Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, you know him. His corrections are everywhere as well, so good. I know one or two have caused a little bit of debate, but to me his style is just really appealing, and he can definitely pull out some fun faces himself. And an easy little tell to pick out Nakatsuru's corrections from Shintani's is that he draws black shading around the ear hole and the Simba conch, yeah, whatever it's called, and does this bit of hatching to define the triangular fossa, that little dip in the ear. Whereas Shintani just doesn't, he just keeps it simple. It's pretty much the exact way he drew ears on DBS Broly. I mean, of course, there are many other little traits to pick out Nakatsuru's work, but this isn't a how to identify an animator video. Kinda off topic to that though, I noticed that this random brute shared a few design similarities to an old Toriyama illustration from the 90s, which isn't really relevant to much, but thought I'd say it. Anyways, yeah, to part B. Some of the stuff after the landing is presumed to be Shintani's animation. It could just be corrections, but it's pretty heavy either way. And not too surprisingly, he does simplify the designs a bit, removes the second highlight shade off the hair, but what's really noteworthy is the bouncy energy he portrays through his animation. It holds a lot of personality, and it's just cool in general to have him animating characters on Dragon Ball for like the first time since 2018. It's been a while. But of course, to the main highlight. The start of the action when Goku goes in is animated by Yohei Sasaki. He was presumed for some character acting on one scene in the first episode and the opening, but action animation is what this guy is an expert at. He's a freelance animator that's worked closely with Studio Bones and Sunrise, and did an insane amount of action on Gintama, like 15 years long. And he did so much weapon-centered combat on that show, which makes him such a perfect fit here. And you can see that experience in every area of his work. Like just with the art, from like the first second he draws these thick outlines around Goku. It's a simple way to express a sense of proximity and closeness to the camera, and he consistently does it. Then when one of the guards is zapped, doing a side-by-side to this unknown animator, you can see straight away just the extra level of intensity but skill behind his drawings. More of an angled shape with the mouth, tongue is pointed out instead of being drawn flat, more natural flow to the electricity bolts, stretches the clothing, adds little smears and action lines, and when you combine all those little details together, it does make a difference. And this isn't to bag out the original animator on the right here. As an artist who draws once every 6 months, I find it a good and fun exercise to just like look at corrections and comparisons like this to see what makes a drawing good and what makes one great. Anyways, back to what makes Sasaki's actual animation great. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the original trailer breakdown, but I guess I'll say it again. Goku isn't just swinging the pole back then hitting, he jumps and spins into the attack. I've also talked about the principle of anticipation a few times in the last breakdowns, but this is a good example of using several layers of anticipation, first with the pole spin and then the leap itself. Again, like earlier, it's one of those details you often take for granted. And the actual combat is really fun. Goku uses various bits of the environment like crates and bottles to like distract his opponent, or to bounce off later on. Then he comes from above, launches into a spinning attack. At the same time, Sasaki is mixing these dynamic poses with cool effect shapes in for the clashes, and just the pacing to Goku's movement kinda has this bouncy momentum. It then swaps over to Ken Otsuka. He's also another animator that has a lot of experience doing action, and some pretty great action at that. But it's also the combination of direction and storyboarding as to what fully brings it all together. The slow-mo shot, then the POV one that transitions into an overhead shot, then an animated zoom out, so smooth. Then good staging here, Goku's centered, this is composed pretty well. Also adds a bit of build up by having that small pause. Then that extreme close up on the eyes like everything is about to go down now, which transitions into some fairly detailed action. Again, everything is framed in a very readable way. I like how Goku uses the pole to like hit one dude, and uses the momentum and speed from it as it extends to like launch into this one. The timing is also interesting. Otsuka times Goku almost entirely on threes, and keeps it that way for most of the cut. A bit of a contrast, say, to Minabe earlier, who kinda modulates it up and down. Really like the smeary motion blur effects. Otsuka gets pretty intense with those. Seems Shintani corrected a fair few shots going off the ear shape. Then the combat switches up to projectile-based weapons. Good variety, makes the combat more interesting. It kinda reminds me a bit of when Goku was fighting the Red Ribbon Army. It would often mix hand-to-hand stuff and like chuck guns and rocket launchers in. Also love the way speed is conveyed. By zooming out, it's a simple way to portray it just through composition, because it shows that Goku is covering a lot of ground fast. If it was a medium shot or close-up for example, that would be harder to make out because you wouldn't have as much visual information there. So it's that contrast of small character to big surrounding environment. You can see these types of shots a lot actually in Yutaka Nakamura's animation. It works really well. Then the final hit with the delayed reaction and fall off camera, a neat way to end it. Looking back now, I'm honestly kinda curious as to how much of the choreography and angles were from the storyboard artist, Yoshitaka Yashima, because this is pretty good. Maybe I've been underestimating him. But with saying that, it isn't unusual either for well-known and experienced action animators to storyboard a lot of their own stuff, like Yutaka Nakamura or Kaiichiro Watanabe, or for a Dragon Ball example, Masaki Sato in episode 139. He made some adjustments to the storyboard, or Toru Iwasawa. In Daima's first episode, he chucked some of his own ideas in, so it wouldn't surprise me for someone like Sasaki, for example, to have made some of his own alterations. But that aside, overall this is exactly the type of action I was hoping for when I originally saw the trailers, and also was talking about in the second episode review about how I hope to see action built around long continuous cuts that keep the flow going instead of just, segmenting each individual action into separate cuts. And again, this is just episode 4. You wouldn't think the staff would go so hard for a low-key fight, but they did. Again. And going off the preview for the next one, they still are. Like, you can really feel the hard work the staff have put in. But with that though is my final yap. Thank you for watching. Give like if you enjoyed video. Thank you to all my patrons, and I'll see you later.